In 1998, in the municipality of Bad Kreuznach in West Germany, a pediatric case began attracting attention because it presented rare characteristics consistent with what psychiatrist Stevenson classified as spontaneous memories of a previous life. The patient was a 5-year-old girl, whom we will call Marie, and who was initially managed by a child psychology team from the University of Mainz. The first record was made following episodes that the mother described as statements incompatible with her biography. It all started during a normal breakfast on a winter Tuesday. Marie, sitting in front of a bowl of cereal, suddenly interrupted her meal and said, "I don't belong in this house. My family is further south." She said this with a matter-of-fact tone, as if commenting on something obvious. The mother tried to correct her statement, but the child insisted, "I remember my brothers." 3. They think I disappeared. The behavior did not fit usual imaginative games. The girl seemed to be describing facts that had the same clarity for her as events from the day before. Over the following weeks, new episodes occurred. During consultations, Marie consistently reported a series of male names, supposedly her brothers, and described a simple house near a lake in a Bavarian village. The family had never lived in that region, nor did they have any relatives there. The investigators noted that Marie exhibited age-appropriate language, the absence of delusions, the lack of traumatic events, and no signs of a dissociative disorder. Nevertheless, the reports occurred with unusual precision. When shown maps of Germany during an examination, she pointed firmly to the Garmisch-Partenkirchen area and said, "My house was there. I came back from school and saw the mountains every day." The team maintained a neutral stance, following protocols similar to Stevenson's: do not suggest, record statements verbatim, and observe possible historical correspondences. The mother reported that during nighttime accounts, the child even spoke phrases in a Bavarian dialect, something improbable in a family whose home environment was defined by the High German of public schools. One point caught the psychologist's attention: the emotional coherence. Marie did not seem to be inventing or dramatizing. On the contrary, she spoke with clinical composure, like someone describing childhood memories. At one point, during a projective drawing, she quietly said, "My former mother made potato soup on Sundays. I stood at the window waiting for my brothers to come back from chopping wood." She drew the house with architectural details plausible for the post-war Alpine region. The recurring description of an alleged former family prompted the professionals to deepen the investigation. Stevenson's name was mentioned in the preliminary report as a methodological reference for structured data collection, as the case presented the 3 classic elements he observed: spontaneity, onset in early childhood, and the description of a past identity with verifiable data. What they did not yet know was that a few weeks later, concrete correspondences would emerge between the girl's reports and a real Bavarian family who had lost one of their daughters decades earlier under abrupt circumstances. The second phase of the investigation began when the Mainz team decided to expand the clinical protocol to include structured interviews and audiovisual recordings. The goal was to determine if Marie's reports exhibited a pattern of continuous recall, or if they could be explained by external contamination, parental reinforcement, or an elaborate fantasy, known factors in the literature. However, up to that point, none of these mechanisms seemed compatible with the case. During one of the morning sessions, held in a neutral, silent room furnished only with paper, a pencil, and a low table, the psychologist asked Marie to describe the village where she had lived before, again. The child looked at the paper for a few seconds and began drawing mountainous outlines, dark wooden chalets, and a small body of water she identified as the lake where I used to play. She did this without hesitation. While drawing, she remarked, "My former mother called me Lenny." The psychologist immediately noted the name. It was the first time the child had identified herself with a name other than her own. The team searched for variations of Lenny in Bavarian registries, taking care not to give the family any leads. Methodological rigor was essential. Stevenson was repeatedly cited as a reference in the reports to avoid induction. Nothing Marie said should be suggested, interpreted, or completed by adults. Everything had to come spontaneously from her. In late March of that year, an episode considered crucial occurred during a routine examination. When shown generic photos of alpine landscapes included in the test to observe reactions, Marie pointed to one and said, "That was the way to school. I was scared when it snowed. My oldest brother held my hand." The image did indeed show a secondary road in Oberau, near Garmisch-Partenkirchen. The psychologist made notes silently. Days later, when the procedure was repeated with photos of typical houses in the region, the girl reacted to one specific building. "That looks like ours, but ours was darker. My father worked with wood." The observation was consistent with common occupations in alpine villages during the 1950s and 1960s, a period compatible with what would later become a central point of the historical investigation. The team then decided to discreetly contact a local historian in Bavaria who confirmed that some villages near the mentioned area, specifically Farchent and Oberammergau, had records of families who had lost children in the 1960s. This correlation was noted, but nothing yet proved a direct correspondence. To ensure rigor, any geographical mention was immediately suspended in subsequent sessions so that new information would not be contaminated by adult knowledge. Nevertheless, the memories continued to surface spontaneously. One April morning, Marie woke up from a short nap in the waiting room and, when called for the consultation, mumbled, "I died in the water." The surprised mother looked at the team. Cautiously questioned, without induction, the child only explained, "I slipped and didn't come back." She showed no fear when saying this. She merely reported it as if describing something inevitable. At this point, the case ceased to be just a clinical curiosity and was treated as a potential historical match. The information was too specific and appeared consistent. The question remained whether, in any Bavarian village of the preceding decades, there had actually been a girl named Leni who had brothers, a lake near her house, and a registered death by drowning. And that answer began to emerge weeks later from the municipal records of Bavaria. The confirmation that the case might have a historical correspondence began in May 1998, when the Bavarian historian consulted by the Mainz team sent a folder with death registers from small Alpine villages between 1950 and 1970. Among dozens of names, one immediately caught attention. Helene Leni Auer, born in 1958 and died in 1966 at the age of 8 by drowning in a lake near the village of Farchent. The cause of death was registered as accidental fall into the water while playing outdoors. The girl had exactly 3 brothers, all older. The information mirrored Marie's spontaneous reports point by point. The team chose not to inform the German family immediately. First, it was necessary to check if further details would emerge spontaneously from the child, without external influence. In the following weeks, consultations continued with the same methodological neutrality. During one of these sessions, Marie remarked on something that would later make the case even more consistent. "My former mother wore a blue headscarf when she was sad." The psychologist noted the detail without providing any response. In the records sent from Bavaria was a photograph of the Auer family, taken in 1964, 2 years before Leni's death. A woman with a serious expression was visible, wearing a light blue headscarf. The historian had no knowledge of the child's statements. It was a technical submission without any suggestion or guidance. The coincidence was marked in the report according to the comparison criteria used by Stevenson: specific, not generic, correspondences. In another session, the psychologist asked Marie to talk about the house again. The child said, "The door made noise when my father arrived. He always stomped his foot to knock off the snow." This behavior, stomping the foot to remove snow, is common in alpine areas, especially in old houses without a thermal entry system. But one detail caught attention. Marie tried to explain the sound by reproducing a specific creak with her mouth, similar to aged wood. It was a precise sound that would be difficult to invent without real experience. Every new piece of information had to be cautiously checked. To rule out the possibility that the family had previously accessed information about old accidents in Bavaria, the team checked routines, school history, television, and family contacts. Nothing suggested a source that could provide knowledge about the village of Farchant, the Auer family, or events from the 1960s. It was then that the mother reported a domestic episode that heightened clinical interest. One afternoon, while preparing potato soup, a dish common in the region but not habitual in that house, Marie approached the pot and said, "Exactly like that, just like she made it." When the mother asked, "Who?" the child replied, "My former mother." She stirred slowly because the spoon was heavy. The detail seemed mundane, but according to the historian, the Auer family lived in a traditional wooden house equipped with old utensils, including large spoons used in iron cookware. As the pieces aligned with increasing precision, the team decided to take the most delicate step of the protocol, confirming the existence of the Auer family's house, discreetly visiting the region, and evaluating the structural accuracy of Marie's reports. The objective was not to take the child to the location, a measure considered inappropriate at that stage, but to verify if the house, the lake, the school path, and other described elements truly existed in the physical terrain. The trip would be decisive, and upon arriving at the Alpine village, the team would find more correspondences than they expected. The team traveled to Bavaria in early June 1998, maintaining absolute confidentiality about the case. The priority was to fulfill the historical verification protocol without disturbing the lives of the Auer family, who still resided in the Farchant region. The arrival took place on a cloudy morning, typical of the Alpine valleys, with cold air descending from the mountains and the constant sound of melting water running through the channels beside the narrow streets. Farchant seemed preserved in time. Dark wooden chalets, windows adorned with flowers, and paths winding between pastures and forests. The first task was to locate the former Auer family house. The historian had only sent a general address, without current photos. Nevertheless, just a few minutes of walking were enough for the team to find a chalet that strikingly matched the descriptions Marie had made during the sessions. The house had the dark wooden balcony, the carved supports on the sides, and the sloped roof that the girl had drawn on paper weeks earlier. As the professionals approached, they heard the characteristic creaking of the door, the exact sound Marie had reproduced with her mouth. The confirmation of the location brought another important step: the distance to the lake. The team followed the narrow road indicated on the municipal maps to a small area of calm water surrounded by trees. The lake was only a few hundred meters from the house, consistent with the idea that a child could play there without constant supervision. The site also had a small slippery area formed by smooth stones, which could explain the accident that led to Lenny Auer's death in 1966. Marie's description, "I slipped and didn't come back," became even more significant given the physical scenery. The village school was the third point visited. The route consisted of a gravel path that circled the mountains, bearing a strong resemblance to the photograph Marie had spontaneously pointed to weeks earlier. The team noticed that this path in the 60s had no side protection against snow or ice, information that aligned with the girl's comment about being scared when it snowed. After confirming the physical elements, the most sensitive step remained: checking if surviving members of the Auer family existed and if they would be willing to speak. The local historian managed to cautiously establish contact with the eldest son, who lived nearby. The man confirmed fundamental details. His sister Helene, always called Lenny, had indeed drowned in the lake at the age of 8. The mother often wore a blue headscarf in times of sorrow, and the father worked with wood, making repairs and parts for traditional houses in the region. One of the details that drew the most attention was a memory discreetly revealed by the brother. Lenny used to wait for us at the window when we went to collect wood. She said she was afraid to be alone in the house when it got dark early in the winter. The team recorded the phrase immediately. It was almost identical to what Marie had reported during one of the drawing sessions, without ever having had contact with any person from the Auer family. By this point, no conventional explanation seemed sufficient to justify so many precise correspondences. The case began to fit a pattern observed in various classic investigations by Ian Stevenson. Spontaneous, verifiable memories concentrated between the ages of 2 and 7. With all physical and historical data confirmed, only one step remained, perhaps the most emotionally risky: informing Marie's family about the discovered correspondences and evaluating how to manage the possibility of an eventual meeting between the two families. The team returned from Farshant in late June 1998, carrying a set of evidence that, for the first time, allowed the case to be consolidated within the strictest parameters used in research on spontaneous memories of a possible previous life. The question now was how to communicate these findings to Marie's family without causing undue psychological impact. The professionals opted for a confidential meeting, conducted with neutral language, avoiding any spiritual or sensational interpretation, an approach consistent with what Ian Stevenson advocated in his studies: present facts, not draw conclusions. Marie's mother listened intently as the team explained that various details provided by the girl, names, house architecture, the alleged father's profession, number of siblings, accident location, distance to school, and even the former mother's blue headscarf, matched real historical records of the Auer family, who had lost their daughter Lenny in 1966. The silence that spread across the room lasted for a few seconds. The mother took a deep breath and said, "I just want to know if this can harm her." The psychologist responded cautiously. "So far, there are no signs of distress. She reports as if recalling, not reliving." The next step would have been to evaluate whether Marie should be informed of the Auer family's current existence. The team's recommendation was clear. No. Young children might interpret such information too concretely and create identity confusion. The wisest course was to maintain clinical follow-up and let the memories take their natural course, a tendency observed in numerous cases studied by Stevenson, where memories fade as the child grows up. Meanwhile, Lenny's eldest brother in Bavaria, cautiously informed about the existence of a child describing highly specific memories, reacted with sobriety. He did not ask to meet her, did not insist on contact. He merely remarked, "If it's true, I'm at peace knowing she didn't just disappear." The team logged the statement, but chose not to pass on this information to the girl. The goal was not to establish a bond, but to document. In the following weeks, Marie continued to attend the sessions. Some memories still surfaced, but with less intensity. One afternoon, while assembling a puzzle, she unemotionally remarked, "They were sad when I disappeared." It was the first time she referred to the accident as a disappearance rather than a death. The psychologist noted the detail, already accustomed to the child's pattern: precision, composure, no trace of conscious fantasy. At around 6.5 years old, the memories began to become rarer, a phenomenon extensively described in Stevenson's archives. Children who report such memories usually spontaneously lose access to the content around age 7. For Marie, the process was no different. The reports diminished until they ceased completely the following year. The case was officially closed with a detailed report archived at the university, highlighting 4 points: internal consistency of the reports over months, absence of external contamination or access to historical information, verified correspondences with real records of the Auer family, Gradual disappearance of the memories, consistent with the pattern observed in classic cases in the literature. The team maintained contact with the family only for pedagogical follow-up. Marie grew up without incident, developing a stable school life and no trace of identity confusion. At the age of 12, when asked openly, but without induction, if she remembered the episodes from her childhood, she simply replied, "I think I was dreaming while awake." This type of partial amnesia is common. Many of the cases studied by Stevenson exhibited the same phenomenon, vivid recall in early childhood, followed by almost complete forgetting. Nevertheless, the material gathered remains one of the most complete and methodologically grounded records of spontaneous childhood memories in Germany for the professionals involved. A case that, without drawing premature conclusions, highlights the need to approach unusual phenomena with rigor, neutrality, and scientific openness, exactly as Ian Stevenson advocated. And so ends one of the most fascinating cases of German investigative pediatrics from the 1990s.